In this episode, I'm going to be diving into the world of spirituality, exploring how ancient wisdom, societal pressures, and modern practices have shaped my own belief systems, my understanding, my connection to the world, and my purpose in life, and challenging some of those preset notions. I'm going to ask what it means to live a spiritual life outside of religion, but in a society which is dominated by science and religion, and my expectations of what it should and shouldn't look like. I'm going to ask whether or not we can use practices like breathwork, meditation, visualizations without forcing them into a framework that we have to believe all or nothing. And I'm going to share a little bit about my own personal journey of moving from a place of skepticism to a place of curiosity, and what that's done for my life and my sense of wonder at the world. So let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Differently, a podcast designed to take an idea, pull it apart, and challenge the way that we think about it. I'm your host, Andy Franklin, and I'll be your guide through this sometimes wandering journey of exploration, which will hopefully leave you with more questions than answers and a lot to think about. Okay, so first off, this is obviously another one of those really big emotional subjects. Everybody has very strong and normally polarized views about things like this. So I would like to start by just saying that at no point during this episode am I saying that my views are the truth or the only way that you can think about this. They are literally just my opinions, and I am bringing them to the surface of my attention and hopefully yours to challenge some preconceived notions of what spirituality means, asking interesting questions and challenging our beliefs. I hope that in the light of new or interesting information that I will be able to develop and deepen my understanding of this. And with a growth mindset, I'm not saying that my opinions now are going to be the same as in the future, because I hope that over time, with more information, they will develop and grow. And finally, I'm not suggesting that my truth is your truth. Everybody has to make their own decisions on their journey. And I'm not here to give you your answers. I'm just here to create a catalyst, to ask some interesting questions, and hopefully stir up some questions in you, which you can then challenge and answer for yourselves. So let's start this episode with my personal journey when it comes to this stuff. I've had quite a large mental shift about spirituality in the last year. And that came about in part through a visualization exercise that I did in February this year, which was really eye-opening in the power to change the way that I thought about things. And it really gave me a sense that actually the way that my mind thinks can be altered. There is power in the unknown, which I had previously been shutting down quite heavily through the rigidity of feeling like I had to have a science-based approach to everything, that there was definitely a true and a false. I think for the past 25 years, I've seen myself as an atheist, although I grew up in a Christian family and we went to church. From the age of about 14 or 15, I started questioning that. And since then, I've really given myself this label of an atheist. And while I still hold to that in that I don't believe in one single God, over the past year, I have definitely opened up to the idea that maybe religion and spirituality can be separate, that the two things can coexist but not interfere with each other. I think the combination of religion and pushing so hard against religion as a construct, and then also the idea that everything has to be peer-reviewed, scientifically proven in order to be valid, had led me to a position where I was very fixed in my mindset about what spirituality was and what it wasn't. And so since February, I've really been exploring more about trying to look internally and see what works for me personally, rather than trying to think of what is right or wrong, or trying to fit myself into a label or a box for any one thing. Actually, just trying to really listen to where my values lie with this and what I want to believe in, as opposed to what a certain section or a certain subcategory of people tell me that I should believe in. And so I'm really playing with the idea of spirituality existing outside of the framework of any kind of religion. And then also I'm trying to see whether or not skepticism and spirituality can coexist. I can still most definitely hear things about spirituality, and my gut instinct is to be very skeptical about them. And I think there is an ability to hold those two things, although it's quite difficult, hold those two things in my mind simultaneously in order to not shut them down out of hand, but also hold a healthy level of skepticism about something new until I've tried it and seen how I feel about it at a more personal level. As I said in my episode about actions versus outcomes, I think one of the issues that I've always had with religion is that it's felt very outcome driven. It's felt like in order to be a good person, you have to want the thing that they're promising at the end. You have to be striving towards eternal life, as opposed to just being a good person for the sake of being a good person. It almost removes morality and values for me from a situation and creates this outcome, this goal at the end that you get as a reward for being a good person. Whereas I think spirituality gives me the option to be more action focused, to be more about being in the present moment, about leaning into the beauty of nature and experiences in the present moment and not worrying too much about what that might mean for the future. Now, that's not to say that there aren't lots of really amazing parts of religious beliefs, the community aspect, the being kind to your neighbor, and all of those kind of things. I think it's just that for me, believing a specific and set construct of a group of things without being able to ask questions about each one makes it quite challenging. And so one of my other experiences was soon after this visualization, I then started doing some breath work, and some of the breath work had a profound shift on my understanding of my relationship with the world. It was pretty mind blowing. I would say, although I've never been on a psychedelic trip, that breathwork for me gives me that same kind of sense. I see moving images and vivid colors. I get a sense of connectedness with the entirety of the world around me. And I get to an incredible egoless state. And when I say ego, what I mean is sense of self. I am completely removed from my sense of self and my labels and my thoughts and all of that heavy stuff that sits in the background. And I can just enjoy and experience the present moment for exactly what it is. And that has been another profound shift for me in terms of leaning into this idea of spirituality, that there is this thing that we can do with our own breath that creates this idea that can bring up all of your ideas in your subconscious and also allow you to be completely at peace and at one with the life and the world around us in an incredible kind of connected and beautiful way that I can only describe as a spiritual experience. Even though previously the word spirituality had quite a heavy and laden baggage attached to it for me. And I think I have to lean more into the Eastern philosophy around understanding things than the Western one, when it comes to this kind of experience. And what I mean by that is that in the Western methodology, and especially in science, everything is started at a population level and then taken down from there. So the best and most robust kind of study is a peer-reviewed, double-blind study on something. So it's removing all of the bias, all of the potential for corruption, to see whether or not objectively something is true, something can make a difference. And there is an incredible benefit of that kind of stuff. It removes so much of the ambiguity, and it also stops people from believing things might help them which don't. Like, medicine has been a massive step forward within the Western society, but it does then remove the personal element of it. And so what I feel like I need to do is move more towards an Eastern methodology of it being at a personal level and understanding that all of these things are just options to pick off a shelf. And then I really have to think internally. I have to be like one of the yogis sitting in a cave for a year thinking just about how I think about something. I need to really dig internally and find a core belief structure that works for me on an individual level, whether or not that is something that fits into one of the dogmas or one of the preconceived ideas, almost like a mix and match. And I think when I then think about other elements of spirituality, like pulling oracle cards, I've actually really enjoyed that experience because I view it very much as a way to tap into my subconscious. So, a way to look at an image or look at a description and see the bits that resonate with me at a particular time to potentially allow me to think about something in a different way, or to uncover something that I've been thinking about that I haven't actually realized myself yet. It helps to give a focus to an intention. And I don't think that that's a negative thing, to be able to focus your attention on a particular thing over a short period of time. But I do very much still view them as potentially just helping me expose my own subconscious, rather than there being some kind of mystical truth which is being revealed to me. I don't believe that tarot cards can read the future. I think that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that that is a manipulative technique that people can use in order to exploit people. And I think that also brings up one of these other things that I always worry about with things like spirituality, which is that it does make you more vulnerable to charlatans and people who will exploit you because of your belief system. If you believe 100% that something is true, then people can take that and they can use it in order to extort money out of you or to take you down a path that you wouldn't necessarily have gone on your own. And I think that's really evident when you look at religion, to be honest. The idea that religion has a set number of rules that you have to follow, and you have to believe all of those things in order to follow that religion. The idea that there is one truth, and if you divert from that truth, you are somehow not being true to the religious faith that you follow. And that for me is a really challenging idea, because to use an American politics analogy, you can be a Republican or you can be a Democrat. But what if you are really pro-choice and pro-abortion, and so you would sit on the Democratic side, but at the same time you really believe that guns are a right that everybody should be allowed, and so you very much sit on the Republican side? You're kind of stuck in this middle ground where you have to decide on two abstract concepts which one is more important to you. Whether you believe that the choice to have an abortion is more important than the choice to carry a gun. Whereas those two things are completely separate. And It's a really difficult argument to make for either one when you're trying to compare two things that aren't comparable. Now, I know that some religions are more open to the idea of questioning and challenging the belief structures, but most of them are still based on this idea that there is one God and there is one set of truth and there is one set of rules. And if you don't follow those rules, then you're somehow betraying your own religion. It's definitely created an environment of binary choices. There is a right and there is a wrong, instead of the more nuanced approach of understanding that everything is within context, everything is person specific, everything is subjective based on the person's experience and the lived experience of all of the individuals. I think for me, spirituality also has this big baggage attached with the idea of paganism and the way that Christianity really pushed all of that out. So there was all of the witch hunts and things like that, but there was also the idea that they forced their religion on other people and there was only one true option. And if you didn't believe this thing, then you were somehow morally corrupt. And religions did this in lots of ways. So they created this idea that paganism was evil, and then they also adopted lots of the pagan traditions within Christianity to try and co-opt the society and the people who believed in that thing, while also bringing in their own doctrine. And even today, religion is a massive business. And the amount of money that goes into religious structures and cultures is amazing. I also think that that then creates this structure which is not necessarily beneficial for the individual, but beneficial for the whole. So this idea of being utterly selfless is really championed in society, whereas the best way of being, in my opinion, is to be selfless while still looking after yourself. If you put everybody else's needs before your own, then that might serve the greater good, but it doesn't serve you as an individual. And so there must be a way of being able to look after yourself while still serving the population as a whole. And so I really want to embrace and lean into this idea of spirituality as a personal and individual journey, removing the rigidity of specific doctrines and being okay with whatever my particular belief structure is without having to define it by a set of rules or a set of labels, or even having to explain it to somebody else. I think a lot of these things feel quite intuitive and they feel quite natural until you have to try and explain it to somebody. And then it becomes really difficult because there isn't always language that truly articulates the way that at least I feel about some of these things. It's a sense which loses all of its nuance and its power as soon as I try and apply language to it. But with that, I hold on to a level of skepticism. And I do wonder how that skepticism plays out for other people. I do worry that by encouraging a personalized approach to spirituality, that potentially it can leave people exposed and vulnerable to being exploited. Although again, I challenge myself on this a lot because something which has not been proven to be true doesn't necessarily mean that it does not have benefits. So we know that even placebos make a difference. So with something like Reiki, where the person doesn't actually touch, the practitioner doesn't actually touch the person, lots of people get a benefit out of that thing. Lots of people will go back and will re-experience it and will have a really positive experience from that, even though scientifically there is no evidence whatsoever to support it. It doesn't actually do anything at a scientific level. And yet, I have to challenge myself on the idea that if someone is getting a benefit from that thing, even if it is a placebo, even if it is that not necessarily the benefit which is being sold, then there is still a benefit. So it has to be everybody's individual choice whether or not they believe in that and whether they want to continue to believe in that thing even without evidence if it actually makes a difference to them personally. I have to keep reminding myself that I am not other people's savior. They have to make their own decisions and they have to choose what they want to believe in and take the consequences of those decisions. So going back to this idea of everyday spirituality and really leaning into the joy of the present moment and what the being in the now can give me. I love the idea in Kabbalah around this premise of shards. So the story goes that when the world was created, the essence of life was put into these beautiful glass vases, but the vases couldn't hold such beauty, so they shattered into millions of tiny pieces. And the idea is that every time we see a moment of joy or a moment of beauty in life, if we focus on that thing and we give that our attention, it helps raise that thing back up and gives it its power back. And while I don't necessarily agree with the story, I know it's just a parable, it is a lovely way of thinking of the world, that in those moments of natural beauty that catch you off guard, the idea that in itself is the beauty of life and what we're all living for, and the way to embrace spirituality is a really encouraging one for me personally. It also reminds me about the transient nature of reality, the fact that everything is fleeting, and the fact that we and everything that we believe in will one day be gone. I think it really helps ground me in the moment and give me the ability to enjoy and be content with the world that I'm in and the life that I'm living. And nature is obviously incredible. There are some amazing benefits that you can get from nature and being around nature. There was a study that I was listening to in a book recently where they were talking about CBT therapy conducted in a forest setting as opposed to a normal setting actually had a 61% better outcome rate, which is incredible, but it's also something that we intuitively know. I know that if I'm stressed out and I go for a walk in the woods, it calms my nervous system down. It activates my parasympathetic nervous system. And also seeing the beauty in present moments means that I can apply the spirituality context to anything. Like a music concert, that collective experience is intangible, it's undescribable, and yet there is something so beautiful and moving about being in a room full of people experiencing music together. And so I really try and focus on being aware of those moments when they come up and really enjoying them, really just taking a step back and really just embracing those things with an open heart in a way that previously I would have thought of as a little bit airy fairy, is a term that my dad always used to use, or not based in science, so they didn't really matter. They didn't exist as much as the truth of a certain thing. So again, I would encourage you to think about your own relationship with this in closing. I'm not at all trying to be divisive. Everybody has their own relationship with religion and spirituality. And I really do think it is up to us all as individuals to find where we sit on this continuum of belief systems. I think for me personally, I have really enjoyed leaning into the beauty and the nature of life while still not holding to any particular belief structure. It gives me a freedom to explore and enjoy the world in a way that I hadn't previously experienced. So I guess regardless of your particular beliefs in terms of religion or spirituality, I would ask you to see those beautiful moments all around you. Lean into the amazingness of the world that we live in. And if that means that it opens up an option for you to be more spiritual without judgment and fear of not fitting into the right box, then that would be a beautiful thing, hopefully, for you and for your life moving forwards. So I hope this has been an interesting podcast for you and has raised a few questions. Obviously, I am always willing to hear feedback and comments if you disagree with me. Religion is one of those things that's really emotive, so if you are going to comment, please be kind in the comments. And with that, I'll leave you for today, but thank you for listening and take care.